Hey everybody, in this class we're going to be doing all of our visualizations in R, and we'll be working in the R Studio IDE. So in this lecture I just want to give you some basic familiarity with R and R Studio. We're going to walk through how to install R and R Studio, and then I'll show you a few features of the R Studio IDE. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. If you go to the course website, there's a link to this page, or you can just Google it. You can just Google something like install R Studio Desktop, and there you see links for installing both R and R Studio, which is pretty convenient. So first you're going to start with step one, install R. So you'll click on this download and install R, and this will take you to CRAN, which is where you can install R. And you have two options, or three options actually. I imagine not a lot of you are running Linux. So if you're a Mac user, you click on this link. If you're a Windows user, you click on this link. If you click on Windows, you notice that there's a number of options here. The one that you want for the first time installing R is Base, so you click on Base. Then it'll take you to this window here, and then you just click on Download R 4.3. That's the most current version at the time that I'm recording here, and it'll automatically download that for you. Then you click on the file once it downloads and install it into your environment. Okay. If you're a Mac user, we'll just go back here. So you'll just click on this first link here, and this will enable you to install, on your Mac. There's some other options here available, but for the vast majority of cases, this link will work just fine. Okay, so that's installing R. So next you'll install R Studio, and it's going to automatically detect what kind of system you have. So for me, I'm working on a Windows 10 machine here, and if I just click on this, it automatically downloads the most recent version of R Studio, and then from there the installation's easy. Okay, I'm not going to reinstall that here because I've already done that. I just want to show you where the links are, where the relevant links are. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at R Studio, and we're going to look at some of its features. Okay, so once you have R and R Studio installed, you'll open R Studio. You don't need to go to R. You can just access R through R Studio, and it should automatically detect R if you have it installed. So you'll open R Studio, and this is basically what you're going to see. What you're going to see at first is going to be a little bit different. I'll explain why that is in a little bit. But you're going to see a bunch of different panes here. And there are essentially four different panes. There's a console. And along with that, you'll see tabs for terminal and background jobs. And then you'll see this files, plots, etc. down here. Then you'll see this environment, history, connections, etc. tab. If you have a project folder that has version control, then you'll also see a Git tab here. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The source window shows you the file that you're working on. This could be an R script, it could be a Quarto document, it could be an app.r file for a Shiny app. So let's go ahead and open a couple of different types of source files. We can start with an R script. We can also open a Quarto document. And then, of course, we have to have a title for it. Let's say test. We'll leave it as an HTML file. Okay. And then we can have a presentation. We can have an R Markdown file. Like I said, a app.r file for a Shiny Web app, etc. Okay, so this is your source document that you're going to be working in most of the time. You'll be saving this. If I asked you to send your source document, this is what I mean, some of your Quarto files, some of your R files, so that I can see where you're having problems. Okay. There's a number of, so we can type code in all of these different source documents, or we can type code in the console. right? So one of the first things we want to do is to install at the beginning of every lesson, you're going to have to install some packages if you don't already have them installed. So like, let's say we wanted to install the tidyverse. We can do install.packages, and we can type parentheses, quotation marks. You always need the quotation marks for the install tidyverse. Okay, and I'm not going to reinstall this now because I already have the tidyverse installed, but if you hit enter, then it's going to install the tidyverse for you. Okay, or you could take that same code and you could put it in an R script, and you can highlight it and hit and click run. Okay, that's another way that you can run code. Or another option is to run the code in a code chunk in a Quarto document. So we see that, you know, anytime we open a Quarto document, it has this sort of sample code, right? It gives us some text, it gives us some code chunks. We can actually run these code chunks in our Quarto document. 1 plus 1 gives us the output 2, or 2 times 2 gives us the output 4. Or we could have up here, it's very common at the top of a Quarto document to have a code chunk that we would label setup, and we would install packages or load packages, usually more commonly, but we could run this code chunk install packages, install.packages, or load packages here in this code chunk. And again, I'm not going to run it because I already have it installed. Or if we were to render our Quarto document, it would automatically run that code as part of the render. I'm not going to talk in depth here about Quarto documents because we're going to do that in the next lesson. But that's basically how you run code. So a little bit more about these different windows. So this is, like I said, the source window. This is the console. The terminal is going to be helpful in some instances for rendering Quarto documents. Background jobs is good for troubleshooting if you're having problems with your Quarto document. The environment tab tells us what's in our environment, like what kinds of files we've uploaded to R. Files here enables us to manipulate files, and right now this is just showing you everything on my hard drive, but usually we would have a project open and it would tell us what files are in the project, and it would enable us to rename the files, to move the files, to delete the files, that type of thing. Plots enables us to view data visualizations. Packages tells us what packages are installed and which ones we have selected or which ones we are using. Next thing I want to show you is how to do a little bit of customization of your R Studio IDE. So if you go to Tools and Global Options, one thing you definitely want to do here before we go any further is you want to make sure that you have this box checked, Use Native Pipe Operator. And I'll explain what that is in a later lesson, but we're going to be using that native pipe operator a lot. So go ahead and make sure that is checked. And then you can also customize the appearance. So right now I have this Chrome theme, but and I like this for writing, but sometimes when I'm just coding, I like to use a dark theme like Chaos, and you can play around with the different themes and see what they look like. And then if you hit apply, it's going to apply that to your R Studio IDE. Okay, so that's the appearance, and then the pane layout. Like I said earlier, your R Studio IDE the layout might look different than what I have here, and this is how you adjust that. So you go here to pane layout, and then right now I have source over here because that's usually the main thing that I'm looking at. I have console over here, environment down here, files down here, but you can take these and you can move them around. So if you want a console to be up here, over here, and source to be over there, you want them to change places, then you can go ahead and switch them around, and now you would have console over here and source over here. Okay, so before we move on, the last thing you want to do is just familiarize yourself with some of the shortcuts that are available to you in the various icons that you see in the R Studio IDE. So here, for example, is a shortcut for inserting code chunks in Quarto documents. Here's a spell checker if you want to use that. here is a find and replace tool. Another one that I want to point out to you is we were talking about the pane layout a little bit ago. So here's a drop down for changing the pane layout, to put the console on the left or the console on the right, or this takes us back to that window that we were looking at earlier, that allows us to change the pane layout. Okay, so just go ahead and take some time and mess around in the R Studio IDE, and so that you become a little bit more familiar with it. Okay, so that's a basic primer on R and R Studio. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about how to start a project folder, and how to work in a Quarto document, and how to render a Quarto document. See you in the next lesson.